Welcome to Real Talk. Real issues seeking real solutions. I want to welcome my co-host today, Nikki G. Welcome to the show.
Hey!
We have a special guest today, Miss Cookie Gardner with Big KD 94.1. She's going to be our guest today, and we're going to talk about some of these issues with the Alabama Department of Correction. How are you today, Miss Gardner?
I am blessed and highly favored. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Hey, Cookie!
Hey, Nikki, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, love?
I'm blessed and highly favored.
Well, let's just get right into the show. Cookie, in your opinion, what is the number one problem with the Alabama Department of Corrections today?
The number one problem is going to be, well, actually we have a couple of them, but the number one problem is that they're not getting treated the way that they should be treated by the guards that are in there. They're not getting health care. They're not getting proper food. They're not getting proper housing. And above all and beyond, it's going to be pardon and parole.
Pardon and parole, yes, that's a big thing today.
That's a big issue. Pardon and parole. Letting them go home. You know, we got to start getting them out of there. Give them some hope so that they can go home to their loved ones. Because they're not getting to go home.
Right.
It's overcrowding.
It is overcrowded. We're like 188% capacity from what I'm reading out here. That creates a situation for a lot of problems, unnecessary problems. About the Board of Pardon and Parole, you know, how could the Board of Pardon and Parole be more efficient in restoring this hope and ultimately cutting down on the violence inside?
Well, I feel like they could cut down on the violence if they would, you know, release a lot of the people that are in there, and if they would be more alert to the people that need health care and be more vigilant of the guards that they're hiring, and more, you know, they need more guards in there. They need to be more aware of who they're hiring and who they're bringing in. They're putting lives at danger and at jeopardy when they, you know, if you're putting people in there that are at high risk or people at lower risk. When you have people that are higher crime rated, murderers and pedophiles and, you know, really like multi-murderers in there, with people that are in there with teenagers such as drug dealers or maybe burglaries that are unarmed burglaries. And then you're putting people in there that have committed a lot of murders that are about to EOS out, and people that are about to EOS out with people that don't have any hope of going home at all. So when you start mixing people of different levels, that's, you know, a very high violence in the prison.
Right. And we just saw that situation here a couple of weeks back with the Daniel Williams case. You know, he should have never been classified to be at that heavy of a security prison to begin with.
Correct.
And, you know, I get what you're saying. Yes, it is like the Alabama Department of Corrections should have better classification in how they place their inmates and where they place their inmates.
Correct, because he was on his way home, one, and he was not a violent offender. He should not have been in there. You know, when you have someone that has committed a crime and they're sentenced to 1 year, how do they end up in a Alabama State Penal Correctional Facility where they're at risk for losing their life?
Right.
And just to elaborate on that, Daniel was the one that was in there for auto theft, correct? For just a year.
Yeah, I believe that.
Just for the people that may not be familiar with it.
Right.
Just for auto theft.
Yeah.
But now Adam was in there for robbery, and it was an unarmed robbery, and it was alleged auto robbery that for an alleged robbery that was not even a burglary, rather, That was an alleged burglary.
Right.
And then that was something that the police allegedly set into motion by setting him up for I think that was for drugs. He allegedly was set up by the police to purchase some drugs, and then that went wrong, so he ended up in prison. You know, speaking to his family several times. And at this point, he's back in the prison, and after he has had brain surgery and 3 strokes. And he's back in the prison, and, you know, he shouldn't even be in the prison. You know, after they've had surgeries, like brain surgeries, why would they send them back to the prison? Or when they've lost an eye, or when they've been assaulted to the point where they cannot defend themselves, sending them back to the prison is corruption within itself.
Right. And very deadly.
Very deadly.
Very deadly.
You have places for them, such as Hamilton A&I for the aged and the infirmed. And it shouldn't just be for you if you're at a certain age.
Infirmed, that's what it's for. To house those individuals that are dealing with, you know, stage 4 issues that are life-threatening, and those that just have disabilities to where they can't protect themselves, as you said.
But a lot of the families are unaware of it.
Right.
They're not aware that that place exists.
Right. But, you know, once again, it's overcrowded just like the rest of the prisons are in the state.
It is.
You know, they only have so many beds. I can understand that. But some kind of arrangement needs to be made, whether, you know, another institution or even buying trailers, you know, would help.
Something needs to be done about it. And I believe that some of the overcrowding can be alleviated by sending the people home.
Right. You know, Representative England, he's trying pretty diligently to get this habitual offender law struck down or taken off the book or something done with it. Do you think that would be a good move for the state as far as relieving overcrowding?
I think that it might. I mean, something has to be done to alleviate the overcrowding, because at this point, building new prisons is not the option, nor is it the answer to alleviate overcrowding in the prison.
Right.
I mean, you're just adding more people to a already overcrowded prison system,
right.
Especially building a new prison for 4,000 beds. That's
right.
just alleviating more people to an already overcrowded prison system.
Right. And as soon as those 4,000 beds become available, there's going to be 4,000 coming from the county jails that are waiting to come into the system right now.
And they're just going to add 4,000 more to that 4,000.
Right. I mean, we're gonna have crime. Society is gonna have crime. There's nothing we can really do to stop it. It's just a reality. I believe it's how we deal with these offenders is the way that we solve some of these issues here in the state of Alabama.
But every offender that's in there is not actually an offender, because a large population of the people that are in there are innocent of the crimes that they're in there, or they're either falsely accused of the crime that they're in there for, or they are mischarged with the wrong crime that they're in there for.
Right. And you know, there's a lot that could be done as far as, you know, alternative prison in the sentencing procedures that go on in the judicial branch. You know, there's many other alternatives to prison. There's drug rehabilitation. There's corrections. There's several programs out there that most of these guys could be allowed to take advantage of, and they're just not. They're just, it seems to me, from what I'm seeing, they're just, going to court with bad lawyers, thinking that it's in their best interest, and actually it's only in the state's best interest.
Correct. I've gone to court with a lot of our incarcerated loved ones, and a lot of the attorneys are public defenders that aren't doing their job. Whereas I've asked, if you have not asked for a bond reduction, why not? Or why are there co-defendants out on lower bonds and this person is still sitting in a county jail waiting to go to court or waiting to be heard by a judge? And the lawyer will say, well, you know, the other co-defendants are already out on bond and the lawyer just didn't ask for a bond reduction or a bond hearing.
Right.
And my question is always, why not?
Right. Well, you know, ultimately, and, you know, Miss Nikki and I was talking about this before we started the program today. You know, ultimately, an attorney is an officer of the court. They work for the courts. They don't work for the people. And, you know, ultimately, the best interest is going to go toward the court.
Correct. But now here's the thing. Attorneys get paid. Advocates don't.
Right.
Attorneys work for the court. Advocates work for the people.
Right. And, you know.
But to a certain capacity, they're all, a lot of the attorneys that we deal with, unfortunately, are all out for class action lawsuits and stuff like that. You know, they may be really out for the people, but at the end of the day, they're out for a class action lawsuit to make money too.
Correct.
I agree with that.
But we don't make the money as advocates. We don't make the money that the attorneys make. We don't get paid like the attorneys get paid.
No, we don't.
Correct.
So therefore, the incarcerated loved ones that I like to say are getting a better representation from us than they do from the paid attorney. We put in more time looking at their cases.
Right. More research, and, you know, even though we as advocates don't have the resource or the research abilities, you know, law enforcement does or the criminal justice system does, you know, I still think that most advocates are doing a great job. And that leads me to my next question. You know, advocacy is a major player in prison reform. And I'd like to ask you, how could it be better?
How it could be better is that the attorneys need to start listening more to the clients. And they need to start acting more proactively, being more proactively, I'd rather say, with their client. Because you're harming your client when you're not listening to your client. When you have clients that tell you that they have certain issues and you're not looking into their background. So the attorneys need to start looking into the backgrounds of their clients more, into more mental health issues, into more learning disabilities, into the judge's background to find out, does this judge have a personal interest in this case? Because sometimes there is a personal interest in the case. Sometimes there is something that the lawyer may be hiding. Right. Sometimes the lawyer doesn't have his or her client's best interest in the case. So if those are the things, then there are some truths that are hidden that can keep the client from getting a fair hearing in their case.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about advocacy as a whole, like the advocacy groups on Facebook, and how could they be more supportive and productive in what they do? And I understand Nikki D has a group, and I understand you have one also.
It's the Concerned Citizens of Alabama organization.
Right. And, you know, what could you tell the supporters and advocates out there today that are supporting and advocating for prison reform, maybe how they could be more productive in their advocating?
Well, families need to get more involved. You know, you have to have the family involvement because the family knows the person more than we do. When your loved one goes to court, be supportive of that loved one. Don't just cast them to the sheep, or, you know, don't just cast them to the judge or to the court system, because they did something wrong. Be supportive of your loved one because, even though they did something wrong, we all fall short. We have all committed a sin. Um, and it could happen to any of us. Anything can happen to us. So we have to have family support. We have to have the support of our community. Know your community representatives, your state representatives. Know who's out there that you need to be able to call when something goes wrong, such as your community representatives, your state representatives, your federal representatives. Know who to call.
Right.
Don't just let them fall through the cracks, because if you don't give them support, then they will fall through the cracks, they will be abused, and they will be murdered in the system.
Right. The actual volume of attendees that attend these protests and rallies is vitally important to reform.
It's vitally important to reform. It's so vital to reform. If people don't see enough, if our representatives and our governor don't see people out there, then they feel like, oh, it's just another group of them out there. They're just out there again, or
Right.
It's nobody showing up. So if you're not out there and you're not out there in numbers, in huge, vast, drastic numbers, then they feel like they don't have to take us serious.
Right.
Show up at the House of Representative meetings. Show up at the meetings when they have the meetings for reform for the prison. Show up at the meetings when they have meetings when your loved one goes to court. Let other people know that your loved one is going to court so that you can have a substantial backing of our public outcry, because I always tell everybody, give a big enough public outcry for your loved one and it will make a change. Don't just leave them alone to be in there by themselves to be abused where nobody knows, because the more of your public that you talk to about what's going on, the more attention you get, the better it is.
Correct.
Make these prison strikes publicly known. Make these abuses and the murders publicly known.
Right.
As public as possible.
Prison Oversight Committee meeting coming up on December the 13th. We really need to get supporters there for that. And I believe there's a rally going on in Montgomery the same day, and we need to get supporters out to turn out to that again also. That's a great idea, Cookie. And the reasoning is sound. If these representatives and the ones that are creating the laws, i.e. the legislation, if, they don't hear us, then, naturally they assume nothing's wrong. So the louder the voice, in my opinion, the better the outcome will be for us actually being heard.
Actually, I think that would be the best place for the protest. Is that the Prison Oversight Committee meeting?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, like I say, I stay on social media quite a bit when I can, and I'm starting to see that a rally is being formed. I can get you the information after the show, or you can get it here later on through the comments. But I believe there is a rally kind of synchronized with the Oversight Committee meeting, and I believe that's a good idea. I believe Mr. Bernard Jemison and his group may be sponsoring this or getting it out to the public. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was one of his posts I saw regarding to the protest.
I think that would be the best place for the meeting, but the best place for the rally, for the protest, would be at the committee oversight meeting.
Right. It would. In my thinking, it would just put more bodies in the same location.
Exactly. Everybody streaming live out there.
Right.
At the same time.
And ultimately, it's going to boil down to the amount of media that we're able to
generate.
Right. And, you know, it has to be, in my opinion, it has to be more than just a one-time event. It has to be an ongoing thing. Like, you know, I understand that, you know, loved ones and supporters don't have a whole lot of time to really, you know, drive from different parts of the state to go to be at a rally. But, you know, a couple hours to 3 hours at a rally is not really making much of a statement. You know, we need to, my thinking on this is, you know, we need to be at those rallies and protests and stay there for a while. Even if it's overnight, carry it into the night. You know, the longer that we're there, the more people is going to see what's actually going on and how serious the protesters are becoming.
I believe in that too.
And I also believe that, you know, we need some inside nonviolent protests going on also. Together in unity and stand in a nonviolent protest against what's going on with them, because, you know, it's going to take everybody working for the same outcome for anything to get changed. We have to apply pressure on, you know, the leaders of state government to, you know, feel the pressure that we can put on them to invoke some kind of ear to our situation and what's really going on.
I believe that we have to put it out there why it makes such a difference on the inside, what the effect is causing from the people on the inside, not just the violence that's going on the inside, or, you know, what's happening to the people on the inside, but what it causes on the outside. What is the effect of the what happens on the outside that the people on the inside striking causes, such as tags not getting made, or furniture not getting made, or cleaning products not getting made? We need to make that known on the outside that's caused from the inside that these people are being used for.
I think the inside really needs to understand, like, the power that they truly hold. You know, I don't think a lot of people truly get it. Like, the power, you know, we can do a lot of stuff on the outside, but the inside holds the power. Like, that's where the money's made. When you shut down and you start hitting their pocket, you know, and I mean, Kayavi and like, when you start hitting their pocket, you're going to get their attention and they're going to want to come to the table.
Yeah, I did just a couple weeks ago. I was just strolling around and doing some research, and, you know, this just is just a real loose estimate, but just given what the federal government gives the per inmate per day, if the system of 26,000 inmates shut down, every day that they are actually in shutdown, they don't get that federal funding from the feds during the shutdown. So that, therefore, that costs them roughly, and then this is just a rough estimate, $2 million per day. Now, that don't sound like a much to the state government. If you do that over 90 days, 180 days, that starts to cut into your total budget. The total prison budget is a little over $400 million for this year. You know, a 90-day shutdown would knock a big hole in that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and I agree with you, Nikki. You know, more
shut it down. Shut it down.
Inside, they do in fact hold the actual power to help bring in change.
Yep. Shut it down. Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
We need to shut it down.
Shut it all the way down. I'm kind of going to change the subject here so we can go ahead and get through the show.
Ms. Gardner, can we talk on rehabilitation for just a minute? Give us your thoughts on that, please.
It's not a lot of rehabilitation, and they're not trying to release them with any rehabilitation. And there's no hope for them when they come home because they're not giving them any kind of rehabilitation while they're there. And if they don't give them any hope, then what do they have to come home to?
Correct. More than likely, they're going to add to the recidivism that we're trying to cut down on. You touched briefly on the medical thing and the mental health services that the Alabama Department of Correction is offering the inmates, and we all have heard how bad this Yes Care medical provider is that we have.
Well, my thing is at this point, I've seen some things that work, like gene site mapping. It costs next to nothing. Medicaid will cover it, and if you don't have healthcare insurance, if you can't afford to pay for it, the state will cover it. So they can give them. It's just a cheek swab, like DNA testing.
Right.
It's a cheek swab to find out what medicines, what psychotropic medicines work, which ones don't work, which ones moderately work.
Right.
Instead of just shooting in the dark and giving them Thorazine or whatever, let's try giving them gene site mapping and cut down on the medication that's just being stabbed in the dark and giving them just anything, and give them something that gives them some hope to say, okay, this works or this moderately works, and instead of giving them something that could be more harmful than helpful.
Correct. Because from what I'm understanding, mental health is a major issue within the Department of Corrections, i.e. meaning, not being able to deal with the hopelessness of the situation, the anxiety or the depression involved with being incarcerated, and I'm sure that leads to a majority of the suicides. And, I think more needs to be done in the mental health sector.
A majority of them are being labeled, okay, once you hit 25, that's when schizophrenia sets in. But what if it's not schizophrenia? What if it's PTSD?
Correct.
If it's PTSD is treatable. Schizophrenia is not, you can treat the symptoms, but the disease itself is not treatable. But however, PTSD is totally treatable. With therapy and the right psychiatric drugs, it is totally treatable. So let's stop mislabeling people and start finding out exactly what's wrong. Start giving them the right medications instead of medications that could be leading to a long-term problem mentally and physically, because you're giving someone the wrong medications that could be causing them a bigger problem. Just like today, it was brought to my attention that a lot of these people that are supposedly found, I guess you want to say, they're saying they're overdosing, but they're not really overdosing. They're just unresponsive.
Right.
So if you're unresponsive and you're a black person, not to say being, racist or anything, but if you're unresponsive and you're a black person, the natural assumption is, oh, they're on drugs, so let's give them Narcan. So if Narcan doesn't work the first time, we're going to give them a second dose or a third dose. Well, what if that didn't work? Now what you have is, okay, we're just going to call it, and they're just deceased and they were on drugs or whatever. But what if they weren't on drugs and they were unresponsive?
Correct.
And the Narcan didn't work. Now you gave them doses of Narcan and assumed that they were on drugs when they were not. I listened to a lady in church today, and her son was given 3 rounds of Narcan when her son was not even on drugs. He actually had some other issues going on with him, and in the long run, he had a heart attack and he had bowel issues because, and I'm going to assume that it was because they gave him so much Narcan that he couldn't bounce back physically. So it affected his heart to the point where he had a heart attack, and then his bowels exploded, and it could have been from the drugs that they gave him, which were the Narcan doses.
Right. Just misdiagnosing these issues come from, the lack of confidence.
Assumptions.
Right. Within the Yes Care provider that the state of Alabama currently has under contract. We've heard some stories and seen some things where they just, keep doing the substandard medical care, and, through the lawsuits, they're going bankrupt and just assigning a new name to to their cells and coming back with the same stuff. This needs to be addressed, and maybe the state needs to get a little better quality care provider than what they have now.
And at this point, a lot of the deaths that are going on in the prison system are being labeled unresponsive or overdose.
Right.
And I don't believe that they're all unresponsive or overdose. I believe that there are other things.
Right. And that was when I asked the question about the transparency. You know, transparency in these deaths are a needed tool for the loved ones on the outside. If you came and you told me my son had died of a drug overdose and, I felt like he didn't, I should be able to readily get that information or get the autopsy results or whatever the case may be. But the way the state's doing business now concerning the Department of Corrections and these deaths, they're actually hiding them or getting them out of the system so quick that nobody can get any information from them. And I say that is criminal in itself.
And I've spoken with them. I've explained to them they can get a second autopsy. It's just that they would have to pay for the autopsy themselves.
Right.
There's no way for the state to deny them a second autopsy.
Well, that I'd heard that also. I didn't know how much truth
They
was
can
involved.
get a second autopsy.
And should. I'm out of questions. Is there anything you'd like to just comment on or bring awareness to? Or
Yes. Our organization has been brought to our attention, to the Concerned Citizens of Alabama organization, that the state of Alabama has insurance policies on our incarcerated loved ones. We have seen some verification. We cannot verify 100%, but we have seen some verification that they have insurance policies worth $5,000 on each incarcerated loved one. We have seen some paperwork where some of our incarcerated loved ones have died, and the families have provided us with the policies where they've had paperwork with the policies on them. They have health insurance because here's the thing, when the incarcerated loved ones have to have extensive surgery, such as they're assaulted and they have to have eye replacement surgery, or these metal plates in their heads or in their eyes, or brain surgeries, or rods put in or something. Those are extensive surgeries. You have to have anesthesiologists, MRIs, bone grafts and stuff. All of these are extensive surgeries, so they're very expensive surgeries that fall on the state as wards of the state. MRIs, all of that is very expensive. So someone has to pay for all of that.
right, and that comes from insurance. I'm sure.
As such,
If they have insurance, they definitely don't file it on the insurance, because just in my personal experience, with Kinetic and his situation with his eye, they have been sending him personal bills to the prison. Like they may have insurance, but they don't automatically.
For the full amount of the hospital bill.
Yes, for the full amount. They don't automatically send it. And I've heard they've had insurance before, so I'm not disputing what you're saying by any means. But I'm just saying, like, it's not their policy that they automatically file it that way, because he's had personal bills sent to him.
Well, our thing is that we've seen some of the billing from other family members,
Mm-hmm.
and they've actually produced where they've had insurance, like death benefit insurance, and medical insurance. And see, my thing is that these bills are being covered by someone, so they have to have something somewhere, because the hospital isn't going to just allow this billing to go on and on. So that would be the question of the day, is who's paying those bills if the incarcerated loved ones cannot pay it. I mean, that's a very valid question to toss out there to the public. Like, Joe Public needs to know where is that money coming from when they're being assaulted in there, and those extensive bills are racking up, because those are hospital bills that we as the public, you and I, Nikki, if we go in the hospital, those are bills that we have to pay.
I've heard they get money off our incarcerated loved ones, like when they pass. But you know, once they pass, what do? They call the family, and you know, they're no longer property of the state anymore. It's your responsibility to bury them. Or if they can't get hold of the loved one, you know, I don't know, a lot of people know about, you know, they have a mass grave site. Like, yeah.
Correct. For something that happened to them when they were wards of the state. The state's responsibility. When the state allowed this to happen to them by not taking care of them.
Correct.
So on that aspect, it becomes the question, yet again, who pays these bills for the people that don't have family or don't have some kind of loved one to cover this stuff? Because now I've also come across a family whereas the family was not notified because the person was so-called married, and they said they contacted his spouse, but his spouse was not his spouse because he was legally divorced. They're not following up on their own policy. Just like it is against the law for them to beat any incarcerated person above the waist. They cannot hit them or do anything to them above the waist. That's law. But a lot of them are coming out of there with injuries above the waist. So on that, I always advise the family to ask for the body chart.
I believe there's also a thing called a HIPAA form, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And
It is.
I believe that's where the loved ones or the inmates themselves can actually sequester Alabama Department of Corrections to turn over those medical files.
Correct.
They're good for not doing them too, though.
Or they'll say that they didn't update their files.
Yeah, but I know I've personally dealt with situations where they don't do a body chart and they intentionally don't do one.
Correct.
That's a whole nother
So
story,
what we need is more families showing up at the gate when their loved ones are abused. Don't just call me when you get these calls that they're abused and expect me to show up when you're not showing up. Don't expect me to show up at these protests or Nikki when you're not showing up to these protests. You have to show up. Your voice has to be heard. Show up at the House of Representatives. Show up at these meetings. Show up for everything.
Right. Because ultimately that's where the change is going to come. And complete participation and joint participation between the outside and those struggling on the inside. Ms. Gardner, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us, and you've been
I appreciate you having me on. And we will be on tomorrow. Tell it like it is, 94.1, the Big KP. Download the app from 12 to 1, second and fourth Mondays.
We will be there. As usual, always tune into your show. It's a great show, and for those out there that are listening to this show, please turn on the Big KD 94.1. Thank you once again, and if there's anything you'd like to share further later, you know where Real Talk is, and this is what we do. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
Thank y'all.
And thank you, the viewers, for today's show, for tuning into Real Talk. Real talk, real issues, seeking real solutions. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and share this channel. And also leave a comment.